Howdy, howdy. Welcome back to my channel on building a DIY expedition camper. It has been quite a busy last 2 or 3 months with a whole lot of stuff going on the build out of this expedition camper. And I'm going to share a whole walk around video of the camper and a short bit of a walkthrough and talk about all the updates and upgrades that have been happening over these last couple months, as it's been very busy and difficult for me to get a video out. So thanks again for joining in. Look forward to sharing more with you in this video, and certainly a lot more details to come after this video. Whew, I know it's been a long time since I've done a video update. There's a lot going on with this expedition camper build, and I've really been working hard on it. So let me give you some updates here. It's just been hard to do some videos while working on it so much. So there's a lot going on. You can tell right now the grill off, and that's because all of these wires now are all connected up. They're all connected into relays and also wired into the cab. And this may sound very trivial, but there's probably, I'd have to add it all up, but probably about 3 dozen wires going between the cab and the chassis. Let's see, 4 cameras, 2 sides, 2 in the inside of the cab, switches for these 2 light pods, that light bar. Then there's also going to be an extra set of headlights, high, low beam, turn signal, and driving lights, kind of as redundancy. And also there's an air compressor gauge. There's 2 different antennas, GMRS and ham, voltmeters for both 24 volt and 12 volt, as well as also outside temperature. There's my emergency brake because I've electrified that. Like that one, for example, along with some of the others, are individual wires for safety reasons, also so they can have a direct switch control. Others go down to a relay, so that way I don't have to bring a ton of power in the cab. That's also what I've done. I've also brought a separate 10 gauge power and negative into the cab, even though, yes, there is power in the cab, but it's by the time you add up heated seats at about 15 amps each, plus I'm going to do a heating pad on the center armrest that's mostly for the dog's comfort. You add that into it, you add, all the other controls and switches and some additional light, now power ports, actuators for the overhead boxes because that gets powered from inside the cab. So anyways, all that, so I need to make sure I have extra power and negatives coming into the cab, and with separate fuse panels to power that. So I'm not just ganging it off of the factory fuse panel because there isn't really any really good place to do that. And then I'm really sacrificing capability of that factory fuse panel in that particular circuit. So want to make sure I get that. I have other extra lights that all are now controlled by these different switches and so forth, and all that wiring has to go back and forth. And so it's really nice and clean. You can see I got my nice green tape here to label out sometimes what goes in where in different places, but really for the most part all this is factory. The wires I've added are very insignificant in a lot of respects. You can't even really tell. Do all go into factory chases and are all protected. Factory chase here is our factory chase down here. There's some factory holes here. I didn't drill it all. There's only I had to remove 1 rubber plug, and that was it. And I was thinking I was going to have to drill and put in a big grommet, but everything's got weather protection, weather grommets around our glands, all that stuff. So that's all been bundled up. In addition, which you can't see right now because I just put the bumper up, but I've also got another relay panel here and a fuse panel, waterproof ones that are integrated inside the bumper in the space there. So that way my switches in the cab that control these lights and things like that, they just go right to this relay box, and that way I don't have to pull that 15 amps per one of these lights. It's 30 amps right there, and really I can only pull about 40 amps over a 10 gauge wire in this distance into the cab. So that would draw a tremendous amount of that. Plus I got the ARB locker air compressor, another 15 amps that was powered from inside the cab. So now that instead is powered also by the relay here. So again, it's just switched from inside the cab. So I just need a trivial amount of power, fraction of an amp, just to go ahead and trigger the relay that's down here. And that also now significantly shortens the wire. I cut out probably almost 10 feet of total wire between the negative and the positive that feeds that ARB air locker. So the wire size diameter stayed the same, but I've significantly reduced that wire distance, and so therefore the resistance, so the voltage will stay higher. Not that it runs much or very long, but all that helps. So I've got a whole lot going on here. I've got cameras on the side. My door now holds open. I've got videos coming up on all these. If they already haven't been posted, I'll post these soon. The deck and stairs all now also electrically actuate both wirelessly and wired, and so those slide out, and the stairs and everything else, I just have it in right now. So let's go in and just take another real quick look inside. There's a lot of our stuff that's been happening, and it looks messy at the moment, but there's been a lot of wiring going on here into this switch panel, getting this wire in. There's obviously going to be a cover plate here. There's some of the bathroom finishes and shower heads and stuff that have been installed. My flexible one, which has a holder up here, and this wire is just all temporary, just get all the way right now because I got a bunch of a relay panel here, and again, a lot of temporary stuff, and not cleaned all this up like the other stuff I have cleaned up in the cab because I've been focused on that. And another part I've been focused on is obviously my fuse panel here, this whole control panel, getting all these switches and everything connected in, the air conditioner controller, the heating controller, which I have, I think, 6 zones of heating. Temperature sensors, which one's disconnected at the moment on the other end. I've got disconnects for each one of the batteries. These are just temporary color coding on them. But this way I can, on an emergency shut off, I can shut off all 3 of my battery banks or any one individually and do that remotely from here. I can also see the voltage on each one, and everything's obviously wired in and connecting, and including even tank levels. I've got 3 tank levels. I've got fuel tank, gray tank, and freshwater tank. And you may ask, like, why do I have a fuel tank gauge here? The reason is why not, and it just now gives another point of information for when planning out trips. That's partly why the Garmin's here as well. So, you know, I could take this off the wall, carry it around. You know, I can also control most of the circuits that way in the camper so they can be controlled via that remote, take it outside and do that stuff, do it by the phone. But also it allows for planning in here, for map planning and stuff like that. Knowing how much fuel and water you have so you can kind of think ahead and plan all that stuff out is really nice. Other things, obviously there's a lot going on in here, but I've got my 24 volt to 48 volt DC to Starlink power. That goes all the way up and into the roof. I've got my PepLink router and can have multiple SIM cards. This is still somewhat temporary, but it's starting to get put together. Obviously my AC compressor hose is a DC bus. My Starlink and my PepLink and also my router, internal wireless router and all that, I call it my comms circuit. That's all now also switched from over here, so I can just, when I walk out, you can just turn that off and walk away. Same thing, of course, with the water pump, and all the main lights and everything else are all switched right here. So that way it's really easy to walking out of here, just shut everything down. The water pump is wired up on switch, and it's got a switch where it can be auto on and then a manual on, so you can force it to go on, or you can just, you know, by holding it down in a momentary, or put in the auto mode. Now the auto mode's got a couple of unique things about it. One is I've got a motion sensor that's down here, and so when there's motion around the kitchen sink here or in this space here walking towards the bathroom, it'll automatically trigger the pump to go on. Otherwise it turns it into a timed relay and it shuts it down after a certain number of minutes, and that's adjustable. If I leave the switch on and I walk out of the camper, it's not just going to randomly turn on and off, and if there's a leak or something, obviously make that problem really bad. It'll just automatically shut itself off after a certain number of minutes unless it sees motion. That's part of why the switch also has a manual override, to just build a manual override that. And then also I got a water pressure gauge, which I'm very proud to say it is holding water pressure very well. These are kind of temporary, but that's a CO2 sensor and smoke sensor just for safety in here for now. Got my Cerbo GX. So you can see now this switch, obviously the panel still needs to get mounted in along with the switch, but you can see that now I can dim on the lights under the cabinet, the kitchen cabinets here on either side, right? So one switch right here where it's mainly going to be used, but that way you don't have a separate switch over here, a separate dimmer. You know, figure if you're working in the kitchen, you work in the kitchen. This is the cooking surface, the stove and spices and all that. It's where also the ventilation is from the stove, and this of course is more the prep and the sink and stuff like that. Now I've also installed dimmers underneath each one of the bench seats, and the bench seats have cushions. They're just off right now because I'm finishing up some things here, and also just don't want to damage anything while they're doing this. But those are on dimmers, and not only are those on dimmers, but we have these nice reading lights, which are also, they can adjust where they point, and also are dimmable. They even go into a red color as well. So these cabinet doors are going in. Also, the benches here are fully wired up now, so the benches can lower down electrically. And the same with the dining room table. Let me turn you guys around so you can see that. All right, dining room table now also is all on a switch here to electrically come out. and also go back in, of course. So that comes all the way out to where I am, so it completely fills in this whole middle space here, and that way obviously the actuator can hold it in any one position. Same with the bed. It's also now wired in, or has been for a while, along with, of course, the bed lights. There's the bed lights, and also some more cabinetry in the back here. You can see a lot of that's going in. And, you know, still a lot of wiring to clean up, but, you know, fuse panels are going in. Everything's nicely labeled. Everything's heat shrunk, all of that kind of stuff. So overall, there's a lot of stuff that's been happening in here. Oh yeah, the toilet's been installed. It's fully operational with even a fan, a ventilation fan, and I don't know, some other stuff I can't remember now. It just needs now the cover panels and all that, and the door here too, which all that's been cut, just needs to go in. And even the toilet's hooked up to an actuator to slide it in and out, as well as, of course, a fan for that. So there's a lot. You can tell it's been happening. Oh, by the way, all this plumbing's done. There's actually, as far as plumbing, it's kind of complicated. Well, I guess that's how I am. Everything's plumbed in. There's thermostatic valves for both the sink and also for the showers. The showers have a fixed shower head, this, you know, handheld shower head, and which also being a holder up here, so either one could be used as a fixed. There's also a plug-in one down lower here to be able to like hose out feet or take it outside and hose down the deck or a dog or something outside. Of course, I'm staying in the shower right now, so that is the entryway, which is a wonderful thing about it. The faucet's installed, it's kind of integrated and closed in. I'll show you more. You can see a little bit of it here. It's still a lot more to go on, and then some backsplash and all the mirror and everything. It's got to go over this and all this be covered. But all those showers are selectable here, and then of course there's also a shower out the garage, from inside. Now the benefit of that is all these water connections are inside, including the water fill, which there are two water fills. There's a gravity and a pressure fill. So either one, of course, they all go the same tanks. The pressure fill goes directly through a water filter, a pre-filter, before it goes into the tanks, and then coming out of the tanks it gets filtered additionally through 5 stages of filtration. The gravity fill only goes through the initial strainer before it goes in the tank, because that's what you can do. If it's pumped in that way, put another filter there. That way, if I need a fill from a jerry can, or, you know, or something like that, that can be done that way. Siphon hose, we have really no pressure or whatever it may be. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot happening in the back here too. I'll just give you a quick little walk around, and a lot of other wiring underneath the chassis. You can see we got 2 of the 4-gallon roto packs here, and then also a shovel. There's going to be a cover here, and then of course some actuators to actuate this up, and the spare tire carrier is already mounted down in there, and then of course these storage boxes, and there are extra lights mounted in that all tie into the turn signal, brake lights, parking lights, all the stuff down here, along with just some accessory kind of lights here, and then some more lights up and around that are either done or wired or about to be connected. The garage still's got the bike racks and stuff to go in, and a lot of wiring is starting to happen, but there's more, a lot of wiring's been done, more needs to be done there. And then in here, this big storage cabinet, pretty much everything's done in here. Let's see, this is, this I don't have the chains on right now, but it's nearly all done down here. Just needs to have a little more cleanup down here. But there's 4, it's hard to hold this up at the same time. There's 4 DC to DC chargers, 2 from 12 to 24 volt to charge from the 12 volt factory alternator to charge the 24 volt batteries in the camper, 2 for 1 redundancy but also extra capacity, because there's extra capacity on that factory alternator, might as well use it. And there's 2 from 24 volt to 12 volt. Now 1 is kind of a trickle charge. It's really running all the time for the most part, just a trickle charge to starter battery, make sure it's always able to start. And you know, because always going to be some little bit of vampire loads and stuff on it. The other one's a big boost charger, so if the factory battery goes dead, it can really give it a big boost, or to support like some heavy winching operations from the 24 volt battery, because both the front and the rear winches are 12 volt, easy to get that way, harder to get 24 volt. And so now you can pull a lot of extra power to support winching operations, which you think about, a winch can draw several hundred amps, way more than a factory alternator can provide, and even a pretty big load on a factory battery. Speaking of battery, the factory battery's been upgraded to a bigger size. It's tucked away inside this watertight box, and up high there, you know, let's set this down. Oh, that's better. It was mounted just on the factory rails right here, and so that's been remounted. Of course, all this wiring's been improved, so there's more chassis connections, better negative connections. There's disconnects for everything to be able to separate stuff. There's even timed relays. When starting the car, the DC 12 to 24 volt DC chargers don't turn on. They turn off when starting the car, things like that. And of course, everything's all fused up and stuff. There's air connections also in every corner, including front and rear. The big air compressor, I rewired some things to make it better and rerouted the hose to make that better. And I'll have a video come up, in part because where the hose was just got really hot. And I had 2 hoses fail because of it when testing out the air compressor up to its maximum pressure of 150 psi. And I did a thermograph of that, and I'll share that. But just to cut the punchline, about 350 degrees Fahrenheit, so very hot. And that was enough to make things fail. There's even some voltage gauges. You can see one there for the 24 volt, one here for the 12 volt. This is really more from a safety point of view, so that if you shut something off, you can still see visually that there's power or not. And anyways, all that's done. There's emergency jumpers here that have disconnects. And I wish I kind of had this cab open and down because there's a lot of wiring that's happened down here. But anyways, I know it's a lot. That's a really long-winded update, and there's a lot of wiring inside the cab that's starting to all happen now and starting to form up, but there's still a lot more that has to happen in the cab. Building out the center console, the little overhead console, obviously finish up all the wires, the switches, which there's a lot going on in there, a few exterior lights, and obviously that continuation inside the camper, finishing up panels and making things functional and stuff. But more and more every day, things are getting functional. It's really great. So I got a lot more individual videos on a lot of details here coming up, but that's just my update on my DIY Expedition camper build. Thank you for watching, subscribing, and sharing with others, and look forward to continue to share more with you shortly. Thanks so much for joining me in my walk around of my DIY Expedition camper build and all that's going on here. It's a lot going on. I'm going to have some future videos coming up soon that'll go into details about the compressed air system and some recommendations how to improve that, make it safer. Also the slide out entry deck and how I went ahead and electrified that along with the stairs and made that all work really off just a single power trigger, which was very tricky to do, but figured it out. And also some other things on the spare tire carrier mount, and on and on. There's so much that's been happening. So thanks again for watching, sharing with others, and look forward to sharing more with you in my future videos.